They say that a reasonable man adapts to the world, and that an unreasonable man expects the world to adapt to him. Therefore, all progress in this world is because of unreasonable men. And we have two of the most unreasonable men you will ever meet here today. Collectively, as a community, we owe them a great debt for the research that they have done and shared. Don Lee, on my left here, was key to the success of the famous PDT bar in New York, and now, in his role at Cocktail Kingdom, creates new tools to make bartenders even more the master of flavor and temperature and texture. He's also the creator of the first widely known fat-washed cocktail, the Benton's Old Fashioned, that I'm sure you've all made from time to time or enjoyed in New York. On his right is the mad scientist himself, Mr. Dave Arnold, from Booker and Axe in New York. Dave has distilled all his knowledge and experience and experiments and blog posts and late-night drunken conversations into this gorgeous new book, Liquid Intelligence. It's like sitting down with Dave for a couple of days in a row, and he actually realizes that you've barely got a high school education and walks you through all the principles and options of using science to make better drinks for your guests. That's what it's all about. All of this has been generously underwritten by the local hero brand, Olmeca Altos, who've paid for everything, and also they gave everybody a shot. So that's pretty cool. One last thing before I turn the podium over to these gentlemen who are pushing the boundaries of what we all do. Please, please, please use the Hilton Wi-Fi, download the app on Android or iPhone, and rate this seminar. Please tell us what you think of it. This is your Tales of the Cocktail, not ours. And we want to come back next year and do something that you like even better than that. And one last thing. If you survive this seminar, unfrozen, unblinded, unpoisoned, the shops outside, Bittered Sling Bitters and La Europea, will be open after the seminar for you to stock up on their excellent, rare, unusual, and very keenly priced products. So please don't just race out into the nearest mezcaleria. Go and buy some of these products, because you won't get a chance to do it again. And without further ado, I turn the stage over to Mr. Dave Arnold and Mr. Don Lee.
I can't really sit during presentations like this, so I'm going to stand. I hope that's okay. Also, I apologize that neither of us speak Spanish. I'm going to try. I'm known for speaking rather quickly and using a lot of slang, so I'm going to attempt to tone down both my slang and my quick speaking. But I'll get excited and mess up, so I apologize in advance for that. So while Don is working on this, working on getting the presentation, I think before we actually go through any techniques, we are going to demo some techniques here today. There's a lot of kind of misconceptions about why you might want to use new techniques or why you might be interested into, forget even calling it like science, but a more kind of analytical approach to making cocktails. And I think there's a lot of bad impressions about why you would want to do that. And a lot of it has to do with kind of crazy presentation tricks or trying to make things that are kind of just wacky or off-kilter. And really, that's kind of the farthest thing from the truth. At my bar, Booker and Dax, in New York, I try to focus on making kind of very simple looking, very simple, only a couple of ingredients, but each ingredient has been really kind of messed with cocktails. Oh, you're passing number one? Okay. Yep. I'll tell you what you're having, and then we'll go through what it is. So this is a carbonated drink, and obviously it's not a margarita, but it's like if you think about a margarita and how to make it carbonated, this is what we're working on. So it's basically clarified lime juice, which we're going to talk a lot about in a minute. And I'll show you, talk about clarifying and how you... And by the way, nothing we made here today you can't make with something... I didn't bring any of my fancy equipment. I didn't bring my centrifuges because they're too dang heavy, and I already got all my acids confiscated by TSA on the way through Newark, so there you have it. But we didn't use any centrifuges, no rotovapes, nothing that's horribly expensive to do what you have here. This is all stuff that's achievable, and we'll tell you exactly how to achieve it. So it's the Blanco, water, because you need to add water to a carbonated drink, clarified lime juice, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of simple syrup. And we twisted orange peel in to give it the orange that you would need to have for this. Let's see. Now, what you should notice is it's perfectly clear. And this is the first. Are you ready to talk about carbonation or no?
Yeah, keep going. Keep
All right.
going.
So I was talking about this drink.
What into this first?
Oh, Justino. Okay. So first thing to notice is it's clear. That is the kind of most important thing in a carbonated cocktail, and the failure of when people try to carbonate. How many of you have tried to carbonate a drink at your bar before? Right? How many of you took the time to clarify your product? Okay, good. A couple of hands came up. The problem with not clarifying your product is you can get a pretty decent carbonated product that's going to last for a minute or two, a minute or three. This was poured a while ago, has been warming up in a glass, and it's still kind of carbonated. This is the kind of, like, even at this, if you were to take a non-clarified cocktail and pour it in a glass and serve it to someone, it would be great for about 25 seconds, right? And then it's going to go flat, flat, flat. How many of you have tried to carbonate, have realized that you're like, I just can't get the bubbles to stay in the drink as long as I want, right? Exactly. And the real first problem there is that you're not clarifying your products. It needs to be clear. And that realization that I had when I was working on the gin and tonic for the first time in a serious way about, I don't know, oh my God, it's almost 10 years ago now. But when I first started seriously working on the gin and tonic, it was that need to get the bubbles better that kind of started my whole inroads into using technology in cocktails to begin with. And it also, that experimentation, which we'll talk about, led to a lot of the other things that I figured out how to do, including what I'll show you, like Justino later on, which is a technique I use to make booze with, well, I'll talk to you about it later. But anyway, so it's this road that you go down to get it clarified. Another problem that a lot of you might have when you're making carbonated cocktails, how many of you who've tried carbonating cocktails there realize that someone would have one drink and then they were so wasted that they'd fall on the floor drunk and pass out? I've done that. I learned. You need to make a carbonated drink less alcoholic. This is part of the thing you need to learn about when you're... Also, another thing, you need to make carbonated drinks much colder than you make a normal drink. And the reason is that carbon dioxide, which is what actually makes bubbly things bubbly, carbon dioxide is more soluble in alcohol than in water. So you actually need to put more CO2 into something alcoholic to make it taste as bubbly as you would something that's like water, right? Problem being that alcohol also foams a lot more, right? So how do you get around this? One, like I say, you clarify it, and two, you make it much colder than you would. So everyone always, when they're trying to carbonate something, they walk up to me and they go, "Hey, Dave, is this cold enough?" No, it's not. In fact, I have a special freezer at my bar that keeps all of my carbonated stuff at, I can't do the it's like minus 8 or 9 Celsius, right? It's because if you were to put the low alcohol drink, remember I told you to make it low alcohol? This drink here is about 13.5% to 14% alcohol by volume, the one you have right now. And that's kind of the sweet spot. Anything more and you're going to lose carbonation faster and people are going to get wasted, drunk, and fall on the floor. You want someone to order a second drink, right? So you don't want to house people out on the drink. Anything much lower than that, it starts tasting weak and more like you're in a kind of a beer or a shrub product. Anyways, in order to carbonate that properly, you need to get it much colder than someone would do normally with a shaking or anything like that. We have our PowerPoint now?
Yep.
Oh, so we can go back in. So this is the carbonation tank, right? So first thing we've done is we've made sure that our product is cold.
Right here.
This is actually ice and salt, and this is the way that you can actually work at a bar if you want to keep your cocktails, the carbonated cocktails. This is your local brand of Peña Fiel. This is actually the margarita, but we're too lazy to strip the labels off. If you want to keep it cold, and this is very cold. I don't know. We need a here. Vouch for me. Cold, yes, yes, cold. Colder than regular. Colder than regular ice water, right? We get rid of the air. You see that. This, by the way, is the secret. These are $15. You can get them on Amazon. I'm sure they can be shipped to Mexico. We verified that the connectors for the U.S. equipment is the same as here in Mexico, so it's no problem. This whole unit here, and I have the parts ingredients in here. This whole unit, which is what almost all the bartenders I know who do this use, costs less than like $120 U.S. And these caps are $14 U.S. And they screw onto normal soda bottles of any size. First thing you want to do, get it super cold and clear. Then when you put it in the bottle, you squeeze the air out. This is the other problem people do. They try to make it in really nice bottles, but you can't because you need to get rid of the air. And the reason is air is the enemy of carbonation. It is your enemy because it's going to get in this bottle and it's going to cause foaming. It's going to make it so that you're going to have crappy carbonation. Any of you who've tried and you've done the other things right, but you didn't get rid of the air, you've lost. You've lost. Stop. Right? So then this is a bag-and-box connector.
It's the same connector you use for a beer keg.
Yeah, right. Now, here's another thing. Some people will go, oh, they'll puff it up, and then they'll take it off and they'll shake it. Useless, useless. You need to put, can you guys hear this? I'm going to get my mic close. I was like, can you hear? Can you hear that? It sounds kind of like being in a boat underneath and the water's pushing on it.
You can really hear this. Here. Hear that vibration? You can feel that vibration going through the bottle as you feel the carbonation going inside the bottle.
And that's how you know. So if someone just goes, and they're done, no. It's like you got to wait until it stops making that noise. Now here's another trick. Open it and let it foam. You don't want this to happen when you're serving a drink, but you want it to happen now. And the reason is that even though I've clarified it, even though I squeezed out all the air, there's all sorts of trapped gases and other kind of nonsense in here that is going to cause you problems. And so that what you need to do is carbonate it 2-3 times. Then after the third time you carbonate it, you let it sit till it's clear, you open it, you pour it out, and everything's good. But this is the reason why I don't do carbonation a la minute at the bar. I do them in 1-liter bottles. A 1-liter bottle will hold 5 pours for a customer. We have them out, and then in between pours, what I'll do, let's pretend I carbonated this 3 times, so I don't have to sit here and carbonate 3 times for you, okay? So I pour my drink out for the customer. I squeeze it. Fluff it, yes. Someone used the correct term. That's a slang term. Fluff. Fluff it. Then it goes back in either in the ice water, if I'm at the salted ice water, or back into my freezer, and it's ready to go the next time around. By the time I pour the next drink, this cap will be gone, and it'll be good. The only other thing I will mention, we have the images of it later, but the only other thing I will mention is that lime juice, and we're going to talk a lot about this in a minute, lime juice spoils. I hate old lime juice. I detest it. So the lime juice that's in here that we clarified, I clarified today, this morning, Don and I clarified this. At the bar, right, you don't want to throw away all of this tequila and sugar and water and work just because you have to hold it to the next day. So what we do at the bar is we make the bottle without the lime juice. Then we pour the drink, and then we pour the lime juice into it at the last minute. And this way, I can keep this bottle for like a week or so. No problems. So this is the way we carbonate at the bar.
So to recap the concepts that are used here, the idea is you all know that if you open a warm beer, it explodes. If you open a cold beer, it doesn't explode, right? When things are cold, you can have more CO2 dissolved inside the liquid. You already know this. So when you're going to do a carbonation, make it as cold as possible. It's harder to carbonate alcohol than it is to carbonate water. So even though this is mostly water, there's still a lot of alcohol in it. So to make it as fizzy as a beer or as a soda, you want to make it super, super cold, colder than just putting it in a refrigerator. That's why we're super chilling this down. As Dave said, when you first do it, you want to squeeze out the air. You know when you make an ice cube in your freezer, you have that white cloud in the center? Even though the water looks clear, there's dissolved gases inside. Those dissolved gases are going to be inside here as well. We first get rid of the air on top because that's bad. The first time we carbonate it and we let it go and you see that bubbling, you're getting rid of all of that other air that was dissolved inside. You do that multiple times and then you'll have only CO2. That way when you open it the third time, it won't foam out on you. Cool? Make sense?
See these micro bubbles? You see these little, when you shake, you see these little micro bubbles? If you don't wait for those to go away, when you open it, do you have the nucleation picture?
Yep.
So you see this? You see this? No, you don't. Sorry, my fault. You see this here? That is extremely highly carbonated water on the left there. You see how there's no bubbles at all? It's because I used very high-strength acids and bases to completely wipe out any cellulose content on the inside of that glass and also to totally melt any kind of organic matter that might be on the inside. It's what we call analytically clean in the trade. And what that means is that if you pour something in it, there's no little places where a bubble can start. And in fact, in order to get a bubble to start in a perfectly clean glass, you would need to have a pressure like 400 times higher than is possible in a carbonated water. It just doesn't happen. So, but notice as soon as I drop this little piece of sugar in, it starts forming bubbles. That's the nucleation site. And even little bubbles from shaking form nucleation sites. So you want to wait, if you can, until it looks clear again. You can see through it. You're not seeing any bubbles. Then when you open it, and you open it gently because you're not an animal, right? Wait for that to come to the top. There. See? Presto. Just in case you're actually going to do this kind of stuff back. You want some couple pointers in case you're actually going to try and do this stuff, which I highly encourage. First of all, this is all very explicitly in here, so you can go through it at a slower pace. One, these get lost. Do not let some person at your bar, right? Also, don't let them throw these things away. It's such a waste. I can't tell you how many times people have thrown away this or thrown away these caps because they think it's garbage, and it's so angry. It makes me so angry. What are the other things that get really in trouble at a bar with carbonation? That's the main thing. People throwing away my equipment. Oh, these are fragile. Do you see how I have a cage on this here? You see this? See this metal thing? If you don't have a cage on this thing, your porter, if you have whatever, someone's going to break your rig all the time. I've had these gauges broken so many times that I just have this rig, and it's fine. We use the same CO2. In Mexico, do they use guns at bars? You have bar guns? Yeah, most of you? Yeah, so it's the same CO2. So if you already have a bar gun program, you can just add this rig to it, and it's not a problem. Same CO2, same everything. Now, you want something done? Oh, that's what I wanted to tell you. 42 to 45 pounds per square inch. Okay? For a cocktail that's about 14% alcohol, 14 to in that range. And if you go too much lower than that, it doesn't have enough bubbles. If you go too much higher than that, it tends to foam a lot more. You can fudge around with it a little bit, but that's where, in general, I like to hit it. A lot of people, when they're having problems carbonating, they'll just keep trying to increase the pressure, and they'll notice that actually their drink feels less and less carbonated by the time it gets out to their customer. That was a great question. Thanks, whoever that was. Okay, here's one other thing. Why the hell would you want to do this? Right? That's an excellent question. Why would you want to do this? Well, it's because bubbles are an ingredient. You sense bubbles on your tongue the same way that you sense other things. In the past 5 years, there's been research showing that you actually have a system, a pathway in your mouth to detect carbon dioxide. What that means is it's an ingredient, the same way sugar's an ingredient, the same way salt's an ingredient, the same way alcohol's an ingredient. And so you should treat it as such. So why would you want to let some freak show make their tonic mix or whatever, and then they choose what the bubble level is in your drink? That's just sloppy, right? And we all know that it just doesn't work. How many of you have wanted to have a really kind of bubbly drink, and then you had to make it with a mixer, and you were just it tasted good, so you kind of felt good, but inside you felt sad, and you knew in your heart that you were doing something wrong? Well, now you don't have to. Now you can feel glad in your heart. At least when you do it right, you can feel glad in your heart, which is about 50% of the time for me. Anyway.
So to recap that, nucleation sites, right? In order for the bubble to form at all, it needs a place to start. So if you buy really expensive champagne glasses, and maybe you have had this in your bar or restaurant, there's only one trail of bubbles coming from it as opposed to coming from the sides of the glass. And if you go to like a, just like a regular restaurant and you put a soda in a glass, you see the bubbles all around the edge of the glass. That's because when you have really expensive glass, they did what Dave Arnold did. They used acids to make it perfectly smooth, and then they'll take a drill and they'll make a little mark on the bottom to create that effect, to make that one stream of bubbles. So the less nucleation sites you have, the less bubbles you'll form. So we're trying to get rid of as much nucleation, whether it's in the form of dissolved gases just from the air, or whether it's in terms of clarifying the lime juice, which we'll talk about in a second. So that is the key to making good carbonated drinks.
If I was going to do this again, I might have actually lowered the proof a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. One other thing. When you're carbonating, when you're making a mix for carbonation, I encourage you, if you can, to look at a recipe that somebody else, whether you trust me or not or think I'm a jerk, look up somebody else's recipe, something that you think tastes good, and taste it. When you taste something that's meant to be carbonated and it's flat, it should taste very weak, right? And it shouldn't taste. It should taste a little bit, to me, undersweet. I know it's counterintuitive.
This is before you carbonate.
Before you carbonate it. So what you need to do is forget trying to balance a recipe the first couple of times you carbonate. Forget it. Make somebody else's recipe. Taste it when it's flat. Taste it when it's warm. Then carbonate it. Then judge. Do I like this? Right? Then judge. Then you know in your head what something has to taste like when it's flat and it's warm in order for it to be good when it's carbonated. Here's another hint. Most of the time you're going to make it, like I say, too much flavor and too much alcohol, and you might think it tastes good, and it probably does, but it's going to be cloying. No one's going to want the second one or the third one. Have a bottle of carbonated water next to you, and just put a little bit into your drink, and just to water it down with carbonated water a little bit so that you can taste what happens as you water it. I think the older I get, and I've heard this from other bartenders too, the older you get, the more you appreciate that little extra bit of water in a drink that you're making. It's going to make the whole night go better. It's going to make the tomorrow of your customer go better, and they're going to come back more. I think that's my personal feeling.
A couple other pro tips. This kind of water bottle, do not use, it will explode. You have to use something that was meant for a carbonated beverage.
That's true.
Get something that is neutral. Don't get flavored seltzer water. Don't use soda bottles. Try to use clean, just regular soda water.
Yeah, another thing. When you're carbonating, think about what's happening with carbonation, right? So with carbonation, you have these bubbles that are breaking on the surface all the time, and they're pushing kind of volatiles and things into your nose, right? And remember also that it's a lot colder than, or it should be, a lot colder than something like a stirred drink would be. So what's a terrible carbonated drink? Manhattan. Terrible carbonated drink. Just wretched. All of that stuff gets blown up in your nose. It tastes too woody. It's just nightmare. So think about what you're doing before you do it. Some things are meant to be carbonated and some things aren't, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Question in the back?
Oh.
You think that it's off, but it's actually not. There can still be some that seeps out.
Yeah, so basically the tip was turn your tanks. So this is a CO2 tank, like we said before, and this is how you kind of turn it off here. You should keep your setting here the same all the time, and then turn this guy off when you're not using it. That's a good tip because a lot of times people they'll think that they've sealed something, but there'll be a leak in and around here, or there'll be a leak in one of the connectors here. Here's another pro tip: don't trust someone trying to sell you equipment who doesn't know anything or has never worked at a bar before. Here's what they're going to do. Anyone who works at home only is going to try to sell you a hose that is very flexible and doesn't have fiber reinforcements. Can you see the fiber reinforcements in this? Right? And the reason is because it bothers them somehow that this is stiff and not flexible. You know what bothers me? A hose exploding in the middle of service. That bothers me. This will never break.
Also, if you guys are into home brewing, the same kegs you use for home brewing can be used to scale this up in batch. So instead of just doing it in small bottles, you can scale it up. It is not an exact one-for-one translation. It's going to be a less good process. You can't get rid of the air on top, but it is possible. And it's fun to watch him just shake like that, right? When you say things that bother him.
Okay. Many people have carbonated keg programs in the States, right? I have been to these bars. These bars are owned by friends of mine. They make good products. You cannot make a highly carbonated beverage in a keg situation. Because as Don says, now look, you can get the biggest human being that works for you to sit there and try to heft 5 gallons and go like this. You can purge it 35 times, and you can get the CO2 in there. You can do it. The problem is there's no way to dispense properly out of one of those kegs and get a high carbonation product. Does that mean it's bad? No. It means choose a product that tastes good with a lower level of carbonation. Just realize that you're going to get a lot of foaming, you're going to lose a lot of carbonation while you're dispensing. And if you have something that's good, that's, as they say in Italian, leggermente frizzante, then it's going to be good using that system. But don't try to do a highly carbonated beverage like a gin and tonic. In my opinion, do what you want, but in my opinion, out of a keg. And if you decide that you need to do that system, I'll tell you the secret. Cold plate. Does this make sense? Is it the same term in Spanish and English, cold plate? It's a block of aluminum with stainless steel tubings that go through it, and you put it in your ice well. Hopefully this translates. You need to run it not through one circuit of your cold plate, 2 circuits of your cold plate. You need it to go a long distance through your cold plate and get cold as you can. It hurts the cold plate, but you can put a little salt in the ice when you do it too, but don't do it too much or you freeze and there's problems. And then you have to get the right dispenser. If some idiot who sells beer for a living tries to sell you one of those little picnic taps, slap them in the face. You need an actual tap that's meant for carbonated liquids. And then be careful because it's going to foam out. Make sense?
Makes sense. All right, moving on. Let's talk about clarification. So as Dave said, part of talking about technology is not just, hey, here's a way to do something, right? We want to say, here's why you'd want to do it. So to show you an easy example of why you'd want to clarify, we made this first drink, this carbonated drink. The history of clarification really starts with food, right? With chefs that were using this freeze-thaw method.
Right. Well, I mean, it goes way back to, like egg whites and rasps for consommé and things like this in the kitchen. But look, the dates, as you get older also, dates kind of blur. But somewhere in the area of 12 years ago, a very famous chef in England called Heston Blumenthal from the Fat Duck got together with some scientists, and they realized that when you freeze stock, like let's say like beef stock, right, and then you let it thaw, it gets all crappy looking, right? And it starts weeping out a liquid, and it looks, you've seen it unfrozen thaw. And realized that this was a way that you could clarify something by taking something that had gelatin in it, freezing it, then letting it thaw out, right? And so then chefs, Wiley Dufresne from WD-50 in New York, who's, well, it's not WD-50 anymore, now it's Alder, WD is closed, he figured, well, I don't have to just do stocks, I can do all kinds of juices. And so all of a sudden we had a whole new category of things that we could clarify easily at restaurant and bar. The problem is, the way it works, it's also, first of all, it contains gelatin, so it's not vegetarian. There's a lot of very high-end vegetarian drinkers, at least in the U.S. I don't know about in Mexico, but in the U.S., it's, a vegetarian doesn't necessarily assume that they can go to the best restaurants and get the best experience, but a vegetarian who's interested in flavor assumes that they can go to the greatest bars in the country and not get shafted because of they're going to get hit with an animal product. That's my feeling. So you have this freeze-thaw thing with the gelatin, and then later we used what's called agar. That's here somewhere. Agar is a seaweed powder. It's the same in English and Spanish, but sometimes you guys say it twice. Agar. I don't know why. Whatever.
So just to finish off freeze-thaw. Freeze-thaw is a very slow process. You bloom the gelatin, you mix it in, you then have to freeze it after it sets. Here's Dave trying to get it out of a frozen pan. Successfully. And then you put it into something, so this is I don't even know what this cloth you're using here is.
Here's the secret. Here's what you're not going to get from the picture. You see the upper, where it is, right? This one here, where like it looks like I'm going like this. That's the secret. No one gets this. First of all, don't freeze your stuff too deep. And then grab your hotel pan, because they use hotel pans here, right? Grab the hotel pan and like stretch it like you're going to pull like a bow and arrow, and it breaks it off of the sides, right? Because you don't want to hack the thing to pieces. And you do not, like a chef, want to put it in hot water to melt the bottom off. So what you do is you grab it like this, and you pull very hard, spin, pull very hard, flip, and then it helps to be a little heavy. push
comes
down
out.
on it and it pops out.
Afterwards, you put it on some kind of a cloth, and then you have to let this thaw at a low temperature. You can't do this at room temperature because gelatin will melt at room temperature. So now you're thawing for hours inside probably a walk-in refrigerator if you're working in a bar.
Process.
It's a 2-day process.
Right. So what are some problems with this? One, if you're at a bar, what are the odds that you can free up that much freezer space for 2 days? 0, right? At least at my bar. And also, lime juice that's 2 days old is crap. It's basura. It's wasted. It's garbage. It's nonsense. I would never use it. I would never serve it. So, in fact, we take our leftover lime juice and make cordial with it because cordial is delicious. I digress. So the point is that this technique, as good as it is, doesn't work for lime juice. Oh, so here I'm just showing like very long story short. We'll cut to what I use now to clarify at the bar is a centrifuge, right? And right now, most bars can't afford to have a centrifuge. I'm not saying that I'm working on fixing that problem, but I'm working on fixing that problem. So you see here, like I'm going to give you a technique today that you can use to clarify that strawberry juice. The other one is grapefruit juice, and we can do it. But the thing about a centrifuge is, when you have such fantastic fruit here, that it's be genius for it. The thing about a centrifuge is that what a centrifuge does is it spins very quickly. And when you have a liquid that has solids and liquid, it just takes and separates them, right? Because the solids are denser, and they as it spins, just like on a merry-go-round, the things want to get pulled out, and they separate based on density. Now, here's what's amazing about a centrifuge is that it allows me to get clear products for look at that strawberry juice. Not so gorgeous there, but if you can, that looks black. But it's really like does it look better for you? Is it just my angle? It looks kind of dull. But in the real life, it's like a vibrant, red, clear, beautiful thing. And I can get about 75 to 80 or 750 to 800 milliliters of clear strawberry juice out of a kilo of strawberries in under a half hour. Boop. Right? So what that means is, do you need that at your bar? No, because you don't need to use fresh strawberries at your bar, juice at your bar, although it's delicious, right? And this technique, it never has to be cooked. So it's a very fresh flavor, super fresh flavor, right? Yes, you don't need to use it, but I'll tell you, it goes very well with many things, including tequila and mezcal. But your yields go way up. So what it does is it takes something that is otherwise unaffordable for you to use at your bar and makes it affordable. The problem is right now, in order to get the centrifuge, you either need to buy one used and know how to fix it, which is what I do, or you need to spend $8,000 to do it, and you need to have about this much space in your bar. But again, I'm working on that problem. I'm working on it. So anyway, do you really want to go into go back. This is how I clarify lime juice at the bar now. So these two things are called, see, you have to be sneaky, right? It takes me years to kind of figure out the sneaky techniques of how to work. So these are what's called wine-finding agents. So this is what people add these things to wines to pull out the haze in wines, right? This one is called Kieselsol. It's a suspended silica gel thing. And this one's called chitosan, which is a hydrocolloid. And they have different charges in them, right? So normally, do I have my bag of crap? I have a miracle ingredient that I add to almost everything at the bar when I'm processing it. It has it's small amounts, but it's called Pectin X Ultra SPL. Yeah. This one, here it is. This one I was able to sneak through TSA. This is my trick, because you only need a very little bit of this. So I always get an old mouthwash container and fill it with Pectin X Ultra SPL, and this is enough to do 15 liters of product, right? So this is pretty good. This magic enzyme is a miracle because you know what enzymes are? They're proteins that catalyze reactions. This one, it breaks down pectin, which is the structure in fruits, and hemicellulose, so it makes them more liquid. And by making them more liquid, I hate goopy drinks. So what it does is it makes things less goopy and it makes it easier for me to clarify. But the other amazing thing about this is that unlike a lot of enzymes, we'll talk about this in a minute, this enzyme is not denatured by bottle-proof liquor, which means I can make liquor with fruit, like real fruit in it, not a fruit flavor, not an infusion, not juice, right? By adding this to the liquor, do we have Justino?
No, but this is the example of the Pectin X.
Yeah, so
it's falling out of solution.
Yeah, it just falls out of solution, bang. And in fact, some things, like, do you guys eat a lot of apples here or no? There's two, no. Apples, yes, no. Like apples, if you add this to the apple juice, this stuff just settles out. And you can get about 2/3 of your apple juice back clear because this stuff will settle at the bottom. Whereas when it's centrifuge, like I say, it's like all the way down. It depends. But this makes things incredibly recoverable. This is very cheap. Very cheap. Considering you're using 2 grams of this for every liter of product that you do, this is like, it might as well be free compared to the cost of like the other stuff.
All right. We're falling behind on time. We have a lot of slides, so we'll answer your questions later, okay? So to go back, you can use the pectin X to break down the pectin, which suspends all the solids. So in that other picture, you see that it's fallen out of solution in that grapefruit juice, right? You could then just pour that off if you had to, but your yield would not be great. You can use a centrifuge to separate it further. These two wine-finding chemicals, the agents, what they do is they're like magnets. They pull things together. One is positive, one is negative. So it pulls everything together and it makes things fall even more out of solution, as you can see in this example.
Yeah, so real quickly, that's lime juice straight up. That's lime juice plus the enzyme, pectin X Ultra SPL, also with some wine-finding agents. Add some wine-finding agents, more things clump together and fall to the bottom. Add more, and actually it looks like it's settling less, but look how freaking clear it is at the top. Look how freaking clear that is. The problem is, if you see the very one on the end, that's the yield I get out of a centrifuge. Look at the yield I get out of the centrifuge. Look at this tiny little thing. That's all that's left down at the bottom, and the rest is clarified juice. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, but assuming you do not have a centrifuge, here's a way that and this is the way that we clarified our lime juice. This is simple agar clarification.
Right.
So,
talk.
Much like using the gelatin, agar is just a hydrocolloid. You bloom it in water by heating up the water. The key trick here is you don't want to boil the lime juice because then you have boiled lime juice. You want to boil a little bit of water, and then... No, you don't have to do that. We've got this here.
I'm going to break it up. I'm going to show them. I'm going to do it for real.
Okay. So you bloom the agar, you slowly add the lime juice to it, and then you just let this set. If you're in a hurry, you put it in a hotel pan on top of another hotel pan that has ice and water on it. You can leave it in a walk-in. You just want it to set. It's going to be the texture of a really, really loose Jell-O. You don't want it to be too strong. The stronger it is, the more product it's going to hold and not let go. We just want it barely holding all the little particulates. If you wanted to get more yield out of it, you would use the SPL first to break down the enzyme, and then you would use the agar.
Oh, you need to do that for things like strawberries, or good luck.
So once you break it down, once it's this, you want to break this into loose curds. You don't want to make this into super tiny pieces because you don't want the agar to come out. But then you want to break this up, and then you can then put this through a cheesecloth or a super bag, which is a monofilament filter bag, and you will be able to just pour it through.
Those things. I use these.
If you're cheap like Dave. Or if you're in a hurry, you can put it in a bag and then put it inside a salad spinner and run the salad spinner, and that's what we call our ghetto fuge. And this will get all the lime juice to come out. So, as you see, Dave is doing this live. This is the leftovers, and this is what it looks like when the lime juice has come out completely clear.
See that?
You want to pass this?
I'll tell you another secret.
Yeah, if you guys want to see, we'll pass this giant tray, and you can see the curds inside the super bag, and you get the clear lime juice that's come out of that.
People always make a mistake when they're doing this, and they squeeze. It looks like I'm squeezing hard because, I don't know why it looks like I am, but I'm not. People squeeze too hard on this, and they force the agar gel through whatever they're serving, and it reclouds this, right, which is a nightmare. So what you have to do, and this might not translate, but in English people tend to remember this, it's called massaging the sack. But it's yeah, and it's like very gently.
No pinching, no nails,
no pinching,
massage.
Massage the sack. And then you'll get, but everyone always fails the first couple of times, so don't worry about it if that.
Actually, why don't you cloud that just to show them what it looks like when it clouds?
All right. So you squeeze too hard on it.
If you force it out, the agar will come through, and it'll literally just make it look cloudy.
Yeah. You see how it's clouding up on me now? See how it's not as clear as it was before?
Here's the clear next to it if you want to see. Right? Clear versus cloudy.
Good job, yelled at. Good job, yelled at. So that's clarification, and to do that, you don't get as high a yield as you would out of a centrifuge, and it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you can do several liters of a time, and the whole process is under an hour.
Easy. Yeah. So, centrifuge.
That's my centrifuge. Yeah, we already talked about it. It's awesome.
You can buy this smaller centrifuge on Amazon at the moment for about $250. It's
I'm going to say wait.
Don't buy it. It's meant for doing blood work. It does little 10 milliliter test tubes at a time. If you wanted to make the amount of lime juice that we use to serve you guys, it would take you all day spinning this all day, filling little test tubes. Don't do this. It's good for testing things, though.
Oh, so this is what I was telling you about Justino. So this is one of the drinks that we've had at the bar for a long time called Banana Justino. Justino like Justin in American, whatever. I don't know why. It's too long. Anyway, but literally we just take bananas, and you don't really get banana juice. At least we don't. Do you get it? You get banana juice? No. So you take the bananas, you blend it. What I'm pouring in with that quart container, and let me just say, it's not just you. It's everywhere I go. No one has quart containers. Why do people hate on quart containers? They're God's gift to the kitchen. Quart containers. Okay, so you put the SPL, which is the magic enzyme that I said to put it in, and you blend it on high speed. You see my hand is against the back of the blender pitcher? See that? You see on the picture, my hand is against the back of the blender pitcher up there, like this. It's because I'm feeling for the temperature. Enzymes work better the warmer they get. So what I do is the VitaPrep acts like a gentle kind of a heater. VitaPrep is the blender. It acts like a gentle heater because of the friction of the blades. So I hold my hand against it until it feels like it's about my temperature or a little warmer. And then I know that the enzyme has worked fast enough and it's ready to go. I pour it into the centrifuge buckets here. I spin it, and then, and go next one. There it is, boom. And I get my whole yield back. Well, if you could see it, it's like super clear and like, kind of beautiful and tastes like bananas. And you can do this. You can actually do some of this without a centrifuge. It's just your yield is very low, and so it's expensive when you're doing it with liquor.
Cool. All right. So let's talk a little bit about acids and the way we use acids behind our bar. So if you work in a normal bar, you're probably working with lemon juice, lime juice, orange juice, grapefruit juice. That's probably it. I've been told that lemon juice is more expensive here because lemons are more expensive. And then in South America, Central America in general, lemons are harder to get compared to us in the United States, where lemons are cheap, limes tend to be expensive. So one of the things we want to talk about is why and how do we use these acids in a cocktail? We generally use an acid and we balance it against the sugar, and then the combined balanced acid-sugar balances against a spirit, right? And this is how we normally think about a cocktail recipe. In our standard recipe, if it calls for lime juice, you can't necessarily substitute lemon juice or orange juice. Lime and lemon work better as substitutes than, say, using orange juice. We all know this, as orange juice is much easier to drink straight. You would never drink lime juice or lemon juice straight, right? It's a little too strong for most folks. So if you're going to think about how do I work with recipes, wouldn't it be really nice if all your citruses were the same level of acidity? Because now you can substitute it for anything else. What if you could take the flavor of an orange juice and it had the same balancing ratio as lemon juice? What if you couldn't get lemons where you are, but you wanted to use a lemon juice recipe and you had orange juice and you could suddenly turn it into lemon juice?
Yeah, or at our bar, we have a lot of oranges that we use for twists and peels, but we can't use the juice because, no offense to most drinks with orange juice, but they suck. You know what I mean? Unless it's a little bit or it's poured over ice, but like a shaken drink with orange juice just doesn't really work that well. It's very hard because it's so diluted. So you want to talk about what they have here?
So you have two things in front of you, the two cups we preset. The one that is orange juice that we have now adjusted to have the same acidity as lemon juice. So it is like straight lemon juice. Taste it, but be aware that it's going to be like lemon juice.
Right, but it has a little bit of the flavor of orange. We have another drink we're going to serve you later that is orange juice that is corrected, we call them acid adjusted or acid corrected, to the level of lime juice, right? It turns out that your tongue doesn't sense pH, right? It doesn't sense something that you can read with a meter. It actually senses how much acid is there, roughly, more or less. And that's why lemon juice and lime juice, even though they have a different pH, if you use a pH meter, they taste roughly the same acidity level, right? And they're both, this is a number you can remember, they're both 6% acid, roughly. 6%, okay? But they taste very different. Part of this is because lemons and limes actually taste different, but a lot of it is because the acids that are in them are different. Citric lemon juice is roughly, lemon's the yellow one, right? Because what do you guys call a lemon? You call limes limon. What do you call lemons? Limon crappy? Limon amarillo? Yeah. Yeah, get the yellow one, because I've been in arguments. Never mind. Anyway, but the point is that the yellow one is 6% acidity, almost all of it citric acid. Citric acid, okay? You can buy this at stores or homebrew shops or anything. Lime juice is also 6% acidity, but 4% of that acidity is citric acid, and 2% of that acidity is malic acid. Malic acid is the acid from kind of green apples, that kind of green apple flavor. So when I want something to taste like lime, I'll take the orange juice or whatever I'm using, and I'll bring it up with citric and malic. Like the one you have here, we wanted to keep it more like lemon, and so I bring it up with just citric alone. The clear one that you have is a mixture of tartaric acid, which is the grape kind of an acid, and lactic acid, which is kind of like pickles or sauerkraut. That's the acid blend that you would get in a champagne that has gone through malolactic fermentation. And so I use this. Do you guys drink a lot of Campari here in Mexico? Some? You do? Yeah, good. It's good. Anyway, I add, when I make a Campari and soda, I don't want it to taste citrusy. So I don't use citrus-based acids. I use the acid blend in the clear cup that I gave you, which we call champagne acid, a little bit. You don't want to use a lot because it doesn't bring with it natural fruit aromas and characters. It's meant only to help adjust something up or down a little bit. But I use that acid instead because it doesn't bring a fruitiness to it. That's at the same strength as lemonade, but it's whatever, champagne acid.
Right. We're having a little bit of a search back here for the next cocktail, so we're going to move on, and then you'll get that cocktail in a bit.
So we're going to talk infusion?
Yep, let's talk infusion.
Okay, so there's two things we're going to talk about, techniques, rapid infusion and something called milk washing. So rapid infusion, we're not going to serve this necessarily. We are going to milk wash.
This is milk wash first.
Well, I got to infuse to do the milk wash.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Put on the infusion, because I can't milk wash until I have a product to wash.
Right.
It's just not logical.
All right, moving on.
All right, you want to talk about this while I set it up?
This is a EC canister. You probably see this in Starbucks. It's what they make whipped cream out of. If you work in a restaurant, you probably have this as well. This is about $100 US, $120 if you get the full liter size. I suggest you get the full liter size. There's dump and rinse right there. What we're going to be doing with this is that when you think about an infusion, the easy way to think about all infusions is think about making coffee. You all know how to fix coffee. If you have bad coffee, you can imagine a way to make it better. Maybe it needs more coffee. Maybe it needs less water, hotter water. It's pretty simple, right? When you're doing an infusion, all infusions are like making coffee. If you don't get the right flavor, think, what can I change? Do I need to change the base? Do I need to change the surface area of the ingredient, like changing the size of the grind in a coffee? Think about how you fix coffee. The other thing that you do when you make coffee is you make something like espresso, where you're forcing it with pressure. And pressure can change the way an infusion happens. In infusions, most people don't think about the pressure side of it. So the first pressure infusion that people started doing a few years ago, or even longer if you were on the culinary side, was they were using a cryovac machine, a machine where you would vacuum out the air when you're like sealing meat. They would put in a hotel pan, put something like, let's say, Campari, maybe a cucumber in there. You pull out the air. Air comes out of the cucumber, and when you let go of the vacuum, the liquid goes back inside where the air used to be, and now you have a cucumber that is full of Campari. So this is an interesting infusion technique, but you're putting liquid inside solid. You're not taking the solid stuff and making the liquid. So you have a cucumber that tastes like Campari, not Campari that tastes like cucumber. So a few years ago, Dave came up with this interesting way of using positive pressure to do an infusion instead of using negative pressure to do an infusion. So the vacuum is negative pressure. In this case, in this pressurized container, we're going to inject more and more air into it to create positive pressure. So in this case, we're using coffee, which Dave has pre-measured and put inside.
Not yet.
Not yet? Oh, about to?
About to. Make sure before you do it that this is totally clean. Make sure that the gasket's in here and it's totally clean, and smell it beforehand. These things are a nightmare. How many of you own one of these? Thank you. How many of you have someone who washes it, store it like this at night so that the thing doesn't get lost? Right. And how many times have you opened that damn thing and it smells like death? Right. So, yeah, it's the worst. So I always have people store it like this so it's open, it can dry out. Okay, so this is 100 grams of, this is a local coffee, but I don't know what it is because I'm stupid. Normally, they sell a funnel that makes this easier, but again, too stupid to bring it. 100 grams of coffee, which is a boat ton of coffee. Now, listen, the interesting thing about coffee it's extremely bitter. And the interesting thing about rapid infusion is that because it happens so quickly and under pressure, we can shift kind of the levels of what's coming out. So I can get a lot of the aromatics out of the coffee without getting a lot of the bitterness. I'm putting in 500 grams of this guy.
We measured that out before.
Well, because there's the other part. I'm saving this. I'm going to show you a little bit later because this coffee is very strong and I like to water it down a little bit. And here we go. Here's another thing people don't do. One of my barbacks did this. I was like, what are you, cracked? You have to time your infusions. This whole infusion is only going to take 1 minute and 15 seconds. So if you don't time it, right, you could go 20% over, which means it's going to be intensely bitter all of a sudden. So get ready. Boom, boom, boom. This is nitrous oxide, laughing gas, whippets. In it goes. Hit start. Shake. As I shake, the nitrous pressure is pushing the tequila into the coffee grounds, right? But it's not enough pressure because it's not. So boom. You get another one in there. It's fast. Shake it. The second one's going in.
So what's happening here is, just like when we talked about the carbonation step, we are putting that nitrogen inside the liquid. When we add more... you used all the glasses. When we add more pressure to it, now the empty space in between the inside the coffee, in this case, we're compressing that air because that air can be compressed, and now the liquid is going inside. Now the liquid that went inside is essentially like carbonation, but instead nitrogenated, has air bubbles inside. When we vent this at room temperature, we're doing this hot. We're not doing this cold because we want the bubbles to come out. All the bubbles that are inside that coffee come boiling out, and it's going to push the liquid in fast, pull it out fast, instead of waiting for it to go in slowly and come back out slowly. So we're going to cover this with a glass so it doesn't spray all over the place, and we're venting this up. We're not dispensing liquid, we're getting rid of air.
Oh, it clogged. Yeah, that's right. That's good. See how you have to pump? This is what we call a demonstration in the real life. So you have to get all the pressure out, and you want to get it out as fast as possible. So I'm going to sit here and pump. The worst comes to worst, I'll take my jacket and shirt off and open this thing under pressure, which I've had to do several times in my life.
Yeah.
All right, I'll say, Don, hold that glass over me. Did I spray you? Did you get hit? You got it? Yeah? There you go. But the problem is that you got it? Go. Go, do it. No, it's still open. Okay, dude.
As they often say, don't try this at home.
I love when stuff like this happens in demos. It's real life, real. All right, I'll show you how to do it when you get really angry. You got it? Okay, the lucky thing is that the side of this has, see how I clogged it? Son of a bitch. There's a little groove cut in the side of this so that it won't explode. I used to have one of the older ones that didn't have that groove, and when I opened it, it literally was like... So anyway, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to listen to it, because it makes little snap... Can you hear it? Can you? It's too soft.
Might be too soft.
Anyway, I can hear it. It's got like a little snap, crackle, pop action going on. And so what you want to do is let it sit for a little bit. When you're doing something that's not going to get bitter, you can let it sit for a long time. Coffee's going to get bitter, so I'm not going to let it sit forever. Because what's happening is that bubbling is actually forcing the product out. I ruined that. But I need it. And yes, this is how I work in the real life. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Here, hold the mini strainer. This will clog otherwise, so I do a mini strainer. The grind I used here is like fine drip. If you were to use like an espresso grind, or you didn't have this pre-strainer like I'm doing, it would take a long time, like many minutes for it to drain, and then it would just be unpalatably bitter.
So in this example, we're doing coffee because we're going to do a secondary step to this. But if we were doing this with something like cacao nibs, cacao nibs take a really long time to infuse. So normally you'd probably leave it in alcohol for a week to 2 weeks. In that time, you're going to extract all the bitter notes. By doing this technique and doing it in less than 5 minutes, you're able to get all the top notes, the smell of of chocolate, without actually getting any of the bitter notes of the chocolate. In this case, this is going to be a little overly bitter, but we're gonna correct that with our next technique.
And what I also normally do, even though I guess we're running out of time, so we don't, is there's a lot of rum trapped in the coffee grounds. Not rum, tequila. And so what I'll do is I'll usually add a little bit of water to the grounds once they're dry, and that will get rid of, it will pull out some more of the liquor. Similar like when you're making beer, it's called like sparging, right? But since we're running low on time, I won't do that, and I'll sparge just with the rest of the rum. I'll just do it here. Tequila. Son of a bitch. I make this often with tequila. My bad. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a little scatterbrained. All right. And we'll just do it lickety-split. I'll pour some of this out. We'll do what we have so far. Do we need this? That's lime juice. Very measured there. Okay. So this is a technique. This is the reason we did this, to show you. It's called milk washing.
So you all know how if you have coffee that's too bitter, how do you fix it? You add milk, right? Why does this work? Same thing works with tea. All the British people that drink that super black tea, unlike the Asians, what do? They add milk. Milk has this property where it will bind with the tannins and it will pull out all the bitter parts. So just like making a milk punch, that you have the flavor of the milk, in this case, not only are we adding the flavor of the milk, but we're binding the tannins and we're pulling out all that bitterness and leaving behind the flavor of that coffee. What are you looking for?
Now, can you see up close? It's actually already breaking. Do you see that? It's because of the stuff that's in the coffee is causing it to break, even though I haven't added any acid. Some things that you do, you need to add a little extra acid to it to get it to break. You have the thing up, Don, the picture of milk washing?
Nope. They're doing a close-up of what you're doing.
Oh, that's smarter. Okay, so you can see that it's broken. So here's another thing. A lot of people, they don't do... Any of you make cheese or tofu? Any cheese makers or tofu makers? Nice. So you know how, like, the curds, they don't form right away? And what you need to do is... Casein is the protein, by the way, that's doing the work here to make the curds. But the problem is that some of the casein is still going to be left out in the clear liquid. And so what you want to do is to get it to all kind of stick together is slowly move it around like this. But you don't want to be a gorilla about it. You're just trying to get it to, you're trying to get those curds to get bigger and bigger and to stick together. And then the stuff that's left over is clear and has had a lot of kind of bitter or tannic or astringent things kind of removed from it. And you can actually do this. I know you can do this without centrifuge because what we're about to serve you, we did without the centrifuge.
Sadly, the thing that we were about to serve you got stolen, and you're not going to get that.
What?
It was stolen from the back of the house just now.
What?
I'm not even joking. It really did happen.
Oh, my God.
So,
all right,
what?
well, show the picture of the milk washing, and I'll tell you what you're missing.
There's only one batch. So,
here's what you're missing. So you see it settles out, and then what we did is you can just strain it through a cheesecloth and then through a coffee filter, and it will become very clear. Wow, that sucks. So
we literally spent 2 days working on this.
So here you go. So here's what we were going to make for you. It was delicious. So we started with the Blanco, and we took hibiscus flowers. How do you make it? How do you say it?
Jamaica.
Right.
Jamaica.
We got really good ones. We went to the Mercado
Merced,
right? And we got some nice good ones. And we infused them cold for about an hour. A lot. We wanted a very strong flavor of hibiscus. So we put I put like 40, either 20 or 40, I can't remember. We basically filled the bottle with hibiscus flowers, and it turned that beautiful bright red. The problem with hibiscus is that even though it's delicious, and delicious as a tea without alcohol, that when you mix it with alcohol, I'm sure everyone here has made hibiscus drinks, right? You ever notice that when you have the hibiscus drink, you get a little bit of something here, right? And so milk washing takes that away. It takes away that little bit that's here, but leaves all of the stuff that's in here from the hibiscus that you like. The other really fun thing about this milk washing technique is that, remember I told you, in milk, the main protein that we're working with here is casein. That's the milk protein that you make cheese out of. But there's a whole other set of proteins called whey proteins, right? And the whey proteins stay in here, and what they do is when you shake the drink, it gets this incredible foamy head on it. Not exactly like you used an egg white, maybe halfway to where it's an egg white, but it doesn't have an egg white in it, right? And so you get these really incredibly, so we had this hibiscus Blanco tequila that we had milk washed with a creamy, shaky head, and we had made acid-adjusted orange juice. So we had taken grapefruit juice. We took grapefruit juice, and we did acid-adjusted to like lemon, because we wanted to work with that lemon thing for you, and then we mixed that with simple syrup, and it was delicious. I had some pinch of salt, which is a secret ingredient and everything. Just imagine how delicious that was. Just think about it.
In your comment cards to the hotel, angry, where's my hibiscus cocktail?
Yeah. But anyway, it's something you can easily do, at your bar.
It's a fun technique. It's also one of those things where you've all at some point probably made a batch of some kind of infusion, and you're going to probably throw it away because it's too bitter. Well, add some milk. Let's see what happens.
We're doing nitro next, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So can we get some help?
No. Let's, other infusions, fat washing, other infusions just to talk about. All right. So the things to think about when you're doing an infusion, again, you're thinking about the surface area of the ingredient. You're thinking about the temperature of the ingredient that you're using. You're thinking about the flavor of the base. And you're thinking about how that all relates. Thinking about this coffee example again, both in terms of how we did this rapid infusion and how you would normally make coffee. If you're going to make coffee and you're going to do it cold, you can let it sit for a long time. If you're going to do it hot, it happens very quickly, right? So when we're doing an infusion, if you wanted to push or pull the strength, just try changing the temperature if you don't want to try changing everything. When you're doing a fat wash, that is taking the flavors from a fat and adding it to alcohol, what you're doing is you're taking advantage of the fact that alcohol is able to dissolve things that are both polar and nonpolar. So polar, nonpolar, all we're talking about is imagine a magnet. There's a positive side and a negative side. If you put the same poles together, they repel each other. If you put opposite, they attract each other. When you make a salad dressing and use oil and vinegar, they don't mix together. The reason they don't mix together is because they are different. They're the same. They're different poles. So you have the nonpolar that wants to stick together. You have the polar that wants to stick together, and they don't actually mix. Alcohol is able to break both of those and able to dissolve things from the nonpolar side, which is the fat. Fat, nonpolar, water, polar. That's all you really need to remember there. So when you're doing you can add a liquid fat to alcohol. It'll pull out all those flavors, but when you want to change the surface area, you need to think of the size of the container. If I use this bottle and I made it 50% fat, 50% alcohol, I'm not getting a 50% extraction because it's only touching right at that surface area, right? If I take that and I shake it, small bubbles, now I'm going to have more action quickly. If you need to do a fat wash really, really fast, you put it in a blender. Lots of small bubbles, right? You then, if you need to get the fat out quickly, you put it in a centrifuge. Separates the fat from the alcohol. Now the next step is, how do we get rid of this fat? Because you don't want to make a fatty cocktail. So the two ways you can do it is you can do a physical separation like this using a separating funnel where it gets narrow as it gets to the bottom. Let it just drip out of that bottom. You get all the alcohol. The oil stays on top. Or if you're like me and you don't have this equipment, you put it in the freezer. Alcohol doesn't freeze. Stays liquid, the fat freezes, you can take all that fat off and you get all that wonderful fat flavor. Cool. Okay. So the other way that we get a lot of infusions on the fly is when we muddle a cocktail. You can make a lot of muddled cocktails, but you're generally just taking some kind of fruit that is fairly fleshy, getting that fruit out of it. Or maybe you're doing something like a mojito where you just want to get a light muddle on that to just get that oils out of it. Here we're going to show you a technique where we can take the entire leaf of various plants here as an example, and we're going to use liquid nitrogen to freeze it, muddle it, pour alcohol in it to extract all the flavors while it's still frozen. Because it's frozen and we prevented it from oxidizing in that frozen state, poured that alcohol directly on top of it, and so we don't lose color. We don't get that browning action, and we'll get all the flavor out of it without having to worry about all those problems you normally have when you over muddle something. So we will serve this as a cocktail, but we're going to show you a couple different things, and then we're going to do something absolutely ridiculous because we can.
All right, so while I'm doing this, you want to get the blender set up over here?
Sure.
Okay, so this is the drink that we're actually going to serve to you. Actually, I'll pretend that this is simple and whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. We're pretending because you're not going to drink this. We're going to serve you an actual one. So this is a drink that we actually serve at my bar, Booker and Dax. And because nobody uses this ingredient in bars in New York, I can literally just call the drink Hoja Santa because no one's going to know any better. It's very hard to get in the U.S. But I did a demonstration with Rick Bayless in Chicago at Frontera Grill, I don't know, like 6 months ago, and he gave us a list of Mexican ingredients that he wanted to feature. And one of them, because he grows these in his garden, not these particular ones, these are from the Merced, but he's like, Hoja Santa. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. You guys all know this leaf, right? Do you know that this is it comes from a pepper plant? Do you know that? It's like very closely related to black pepper, and also extremely closely related to a leaf that I can buy in New York easily that's used for chewing betel nut. So they would wrap this up and then chew it, and they get that, you ever seen people spit that weird colored stuff with betel nut? Yeah, it's very similar. This one, yours is actually a lot better. The betel nut, when you make drinks out of it, because I've done it, it has a kind of a slight poison taste that Hoja Santa doesn't have. So anyway, so we're going to stick one whole Hoja Santa leaf in per drink, and then I found that it needed a little extra herb, so we put a little bit of cilantro in, but just like, this one's kind of small. Oh, this is good. Here. Just like, the 3-leaf clover almost of cilantro that goes in. Now comes the fun part. A little bit of liquid nitrogen. Now, the first drink that I made with this, I used Thai basil, which is a very nice spice, but it's easier to freeze. Hoja Santa is very big and it's a little bit leathery, so it's difficult to freeze. So what I do is, in general, I put a little bit extra liquid nitrogen in than I need, and then you carefully pour some back before you crush it, because if you have too much liquid nitrogen in this container, and I'll talk a little bit more about safety in a minute, if there's too much liquid nitrogen in this container, it's going to affect the dilution of your drink because it's going to make it too cold, right? And I apologize to anyone who's under the age of like 25 because apparently this sounds horrible to you. Notice I'm not holding the bottom of the freaking tin. People have done a lot of unsafe things with liquid nitrogen in bars. I don't recommend that. Like, we never serve anything. Can I have a glass for 1 second? Empty? We never serve anything at the bar with liquid nitrogen that that has liquid nitrogen in it. We're very careful. It looks like we're being very nonchalant, but we're not actually. So I don't know if you can see in here. Can you see how it's completely powdered? Hopefully. It's hard to see in there. It's dark in there. Believe me. Yeah. We have a picture of it up there. So then I'm going to add 2. We have a jig? Jigger? All right, never mind. And 1. And I have no Dale deGroff, my friend. And then, so then what happens now is that when we freeze it with liquid nitrogen, it's so cold and frozen that the enzymes that are in it that turn things brown and swampy, they can't act because they're frozen. And then when I add the high-proof liquor to it, the liquor stops the enzymes from working, and so it stays nice and green. Then I'm going to add, I'm adding about 2/3 of an ounce, what was the number in mils? 20 milliliters of our acid-adjusted OJ, orange juice, which we can give you the recipe for. It's in here. And the same amount of simple syrup. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. By the way, at the bar, when I'm doing salt, what I do is I make a salt solution, 20% salt in water. And this way we can have an eyedropper because, your hands get wet. So it's not very useful to try to put salt into a drink when you're working. Also, you guys get better ice cubes in this hotel. Does everyone in Mexico have access to these suckers? Anyway, they're nicer than what we get. But still, like the texture that you get from shaking out of a cube like this is not going to be the same texture as you get when you shake with like a larger ice cube. And it took me many years to admit that because I hated to admit it, but it is true. And so since I never have access to them, I'm now starting, and eventually maybe we'll sell these fake ice cubes that just provide texture. They don't do any sort of dilution work. So then now we just shake it like a normal cocktail. You want to get the epazote started? I have one in here. Oh, this is purple epazote, which is nice. Different herbs have better or different colors than other ones. So basil Thai basil especially has an amazing color on it. Oh, I'll show you something else. When I'm when we're working, one of the things we do with liquid nitrogen is we don't have freezers to chill our glasses. So, and they work with some glasses but not with others. So be very careful. Some will crack, some won't. But this is how we chill the glasses we use liquid nitrogen. And the folks, they love it. But you get this nice chilled glass like this. And it doesn't cost us that much because we buy it in volume. So you get this bright green color and just like an intense, fresh aroma of the herb, in this case, the hoja santa. And so it's just like the brightest, freshest, fastest expression of, did I just not put that through a freaking strainer? Oh! It's not my life. One of the things I hate is when people get pieces of herb stuck in their teeth as a result of drinks I've served them. Because that's just a date killer right there. There you go. There. So, without the particles, like bright, fresh. Is this already muddled?
It's already muddled, already shaken.
Already shaken?
Yep.
Sweet. Don, you're so freaking efficient. I defy you to get that color with normal kind of muddling. It just wouldn't work. And you wouldn't get that like extreme like punch of herb in your face. And by the way, even though epazote does have a little bit of a kind of a poison taste, I think it actually works with the tequila. I think it's good. I don't mean poison as a bad. I don't mean it badly, but you know what I mean? That little bit of a poison flavor. Okay, so.
You want to nitro all of them and then do?
I think it's unsafe.
You think it's unsafe?
Yeah. Pour some liquid nitrogen in there. This is not safe. Don't do this. Don't worry. Professional driver, closed course. You know what's interesting, Don? I've never done it with this kind of a blender before. So remember, don't seal it. Sealing is your enemy. Sealing blows you up.
Oh yeah, so liquid nitrogen, liquid, wants to become a gas. It's going to expand. You don't want
Step back.
to expand.
Oh, we're good.
Good, fine. You don't want to expand in a closed thing where it's going to then explode on you. There is, I kid you not, a chef who blew his hand off because he put it in the water bottle. Don't do this.
He blew more than his hand off.
Yeah. He died?
He didn't die. He was in a coma for a long time. Okay, now I'm gonna powder this a little more. Okay, and actually, if you don't have liquid nitrogen, but I recommend you get liquid nitrogen. If you don't have liquid nitrogen, you can just make this drink in a blender, but because it's not frozen, it'll taste a little more oxidized than it would otherwise. It's like 90% of the way there. The trick is to make sure that the leaves are always covered with booze, right? And that you don't whip too much air and oxygen into them, because that's kind of what your enemy is. So I see how that's a little too much liquid nitrogen in there, because I'm a bad man. Let's see. Stir it up. Now, here's a big mistake. Let's say I was to turn this blender on now. It would instantly start boiling and spraying towards the ceiling, which would be a nightmare. Wait. But what I am going to do is, this is our acid-adjusted OJ and simple syrup and salt. The salt's already in there. I'm going to hit a quick pulse again to combine it and to get this nice and nice. See how it's not smoking anymore? That's how I know that I'm never, well-ish. That's how I know I'm never going to serve someone liquid nitrogen at the bar, because I never serve anything that's still smoking. If you serve something that's still smoking, you might be serving someone that's toxic. Dump. Next. Don was like, can't you make this ahead of time? I'm like, no.
I wanted to do it in one big bucket. He wanted to do it in a blender.
You can't muddle something that big. Look, there's a reason why when you're muddling, right, you only have like a little bit of sugar or something at the bottom. And the reason is because if there's a lot of liquid in where you're working, you can't get good friction on it, right? And likewise, trying to muddle a whole bucket worth of stuff, it's just not good. It just doesn't work. It's not your friend. And if I was to do this like 3 or 4 hours in advance, it would taste good. It would be good, but it wouldn't be like super fresh. And we wanted super fresh.
I was going for maximum danger if we put it in a bucket and threw it across in 2 different buckets.
We can do that with the rest. We can do that with the rest of the liquid nitrogen, whatever's left. All right, I guess we can start pre-freezing these other guys, right? We got, what, 2 more? All right. Liquid nitrogen in the U.S., in New York, it depends on where you live. We buy it, we go through 160 liters a week. And 160 liters costs us about $150 US. So we're paying about a dollar a liter. What is this half full? What's going on here? Oh yeah. When you're doing a photo shoot with liquid nitrogen, you want the big floof. However, when you're actually working at the bar, it means A, you're wasting liquid nitrogen, and you're probably over-chilling the stuff. But for photo shoots, it's the way to go. Oh, that's cold. So while they're actually making this drink, we'll talk liquid nitrogen safety and then maybe questions and whatever else. Oh, dude.
How much liquid nitrogen do you put in?
Oh, come on, man. You know what?
Start the next one.
Yeah, that's smart. See, Don? I hate these. I love them, I mean. Oh, and so how do you get liquid nitrogen? You get them in these dewars, which I'll pick up in a minute and show you. Or, if you only want to test, if you only want to test, you can actually take these coffee thermoses and you get this stuff at welding shops, is where you get it. And they're the same folks that service hospitals, so it's not like you're getting some sort of like really janky stuff that you don't want to work with. Another thing while we're working, liquid nitrogen is not a chemical. Nitrogen is like 3/4 of the air that we breathe. It will kill you if you don't treat it well, though. I'll talk more about that in 1 second. Let's get your drink done.
The problem with liquid nitrogen is that it won't kill you. It's the lack of oxygen that's going to kill you. So let's say you got in an elevator with this, which you should never do. And let's say the elevator broke down and you were stuck in the elevator now. Let's say you knocked over the dewar of liquid nitrogen, and now the entire elevator is full of liquid nitrogen. Now you have no oxygen to breathe. You would drown in the air.
Funny story. You can't sense that you have no oxygen. You only sense carbon dioxide. So you won't panic at all. You'll just be like, beep, 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 and then you'll pass out and be dead. And here's another interesting fact. Your lungs don't really know whether or not liquid nitrogen is coming, whether oxygen is coming in or out. So if you're breathing pure nitrogen, like your blood is like, oh man, the air needs oxygen, and it'll just literally sucks the oxygen out of your blood every time you breathe. So it's really just not a good idea to do. Also, it can burn you. This is a dewar. They're a couple $100, maybe a little more. But this is how, if you're going to get larger quantities, you get them. Like I said, I use a 160-liter dewar, and it lasts us all week. This is the size. So this is liquid nitrogen. Now, ain't going to hurt you. Don't worry about it. People have misconceptions about kind of what is going to hurt you and what's not. So like getting in an elevator or a car, like when you transport this stuff in a car, I'm looking for something I can pour it into. When you're transporting it in a car, you want to really be careful, like roll all your windows down because, here, you want to get the backside? I'm not going to be able to aim right. You want to... Don't worry about that. That's fine.
That's the plastic trapping because it's getting cold.
So if you were in a car and there were an accident and your airbags went off and you were unconscious for even a second and the nitrogen fell over, you're dead. However, like getting it on you, right? Not a problem. Don't worry about that because what's happening is that an instant layer of vapor forms. So what you don't want is to have your hand in contact with liquid nitrogen as long as, let's say, this table is in contact with liquid nitrogen, because then you become very brittle, just like the herbs did. But you're here, like quickly in your hand. But don't get it in your eyes. It's not a problem. Don't get it in your eyes. Don't travel in closed spaces with it. Don't seal it. The German guy killed himself or almost killed himself by screwing that thing down and taking liquid nitrogen to his girlfriend's house to impress her. Swear to God, that's true. Anything else?
Don't get an elevator.
Never serve it to a customer. Never serve it to a customer. Never serve it to a customer.
So that expansion we talked about that makes bottles explode, if you're going to transport it in something like this, again, don't screw it down. If you were to drink it, it would expand inside of you. It would crush all your ribs. It would freeze your entire esophagus. It would be bad. But do not serve it to your customers ever.
Oh, and now what you're witnessing is how the cocktails for you are actually made. They dump them into giant buckets, and they're going to do bucket shakes. So they're like, do you want us to do it in back?
You're going to do
I'm
a
like,
roller,
hell
you're
no.
going to shake.
Show them how this shit
You're gonna
stuff
roller shake.
actually happens. Right?
Yep.
How's it look?
This is the benefit of going last. You get to make a big mess. You can go as late as we want, right?
Yeah, Leo Robachek, ladies and gentlemen.
James Beard Award-winning mixologist, Leo Robachek.
He's shaking a bucket. He runs one of the best bar programs in the world.
All right, so while these guys are getting these out to you, you want to go to Q&A?
Yeah, sure.
Do we have more slides? I don't even remember now.
Who knows? we make... I don't know. And taste this.
Dunk.
Yeah. Do you guys like Hoja Santa, by the way?
Hey,
Okay.
Dave,
If you like it, I think you will like this because it's very
Don.
much Hoja Santa. It's a little under.
question for you.
It's all right.
Okay.
If you're saying not to seal the thing, but how are you right here? How are you transporting it then?
How are we transporting
You
it?
said not to screw it all the way down, but what are you putting it in?
This is styrofoam. It's just there to be an insulator. It just goes down, no seal. It just will vent out. We got this on Friday. It has been venting all weekend. It went down probably about a third before we even started using it. It actually... The people who sold it to us thought that we were idiots and actually wrote on this very clearly on every side, do not seal this, because it will explode. You really don't want to do that.
It'll get to 800 psi. Yeah.
If you want to buy large amounts of liquid nitrogen, you can get them in pressure-rated dewars, which are made to do that. But unless you're doing that, you always want to make sure it's not sealed.
Do you have those on the streets of Mexico City like we have in New York? Those big silver things that are like this big around and this tall. Do you have them on the streets? I haven't really noticed them. Do you have them? No?
Yeah.
In New York, on the streets, you see them all the time because our electric company uses them to chill stuff underground. So in New York, you can kind of steal it.
Yeah, I've wanted to steal one of those for a long time.
Yeah. Or just take some product. So
The smaller container? the
those
blue
ones
one?
are always, they're under pressure, but not super high pressure. They're like 20 psi, 30 psi. So in the bar, when people aren't used to it, every once in a while, our doer will go, psst. And I'm like, don't worry, if it doesn't make that noise, you'd be dead.
Yeah, it's a safety valve that is built into the dewar. It's meant to do that.
But transporting elevators, when you're taking a large quantity in an elevator, you're supposed to put someone on the ground floor, put it in the elevator, and then stripe the floors and make sure it stops at everything and make sure no one can get on and have someone receive it so no one's riding with the elevator. And I've actually had a doer fall over right before I was going to get on an elevator. My guys picked it up, thought it was all okay, and 30 seconds later, it ruptured because a part of it had become brittle. And it ruptured and blew out all the ceiling tiles and filled the entire hallway with nitrogen. We were prepared because, I drilled my guys with safety, but it's like something to be aware of. It's better if you have a pickup truck than have it in your car. And if you transport even small amounts in your car, you must have all the windows down.
All right, question.
This is a question on your podcast, Dave. You talked about cheating lime juice with malic, citric, and succinic acid.
Yep.
Is there another acid you can use aside from succinic to cheat it? And have you had success duping people with fake lime juice?
Okay, so the question is, if you have to cheat, why would you cheat lime juice? One, you don't have time to carbonate, or two, you're going to bottle something with lime and you're going to let it sit for a couple of weeks, and you don't want it to take on that like kind of detergent flavor, right? So what you can do in those situations is cheat. So you remember that champagne acid blend I gave you? That's tartaric and lactic. So when I want to do lime without any additional citrus, I use 2 parts citric acid, which is the lemon one, 1 part of malic acid, but then my special secret mojo is I use a very small amount of an acid called succinic acid that you can't get from normal supply shops, and that gives it that like little bit of like verdad in the back of your mouth. You know what I'm saying? But you don't fool people, except for they think it tastes a lot more real than any of the other horse crap that has kind of fake flavors in it. It tastes very real in terms of the acid profile, but it doesn't have the aromatics aren't there that would be there with lime. But a small amount in a large base for like, let's say like it's the style drink that we made, it's pretty damn effective.
Yep.
Just wanted to know how
There's
much
a microphone going around.
Oh, sorry.
¿No? Bueno. Sí. ¿Cuánto tiempo dura el jugo de limón ya clarificado? How long does it stand, the clarified lemon juice?
Carlos, translate for me. How long does what last? Oh,
Clarified lime?
Clarifying lime juice is not a preservative. So it lasts the same amount. In other words, it doesn't last at all.
It's better than nothing, but it's like hours, not days.
Oh, interesting. In Mexico, do people juice their limes right beforehand, or do they juice at the beginning of service? Beginning of service. Okay, so it's like in America. People who come from culture where you juice at the beginning of service, we tend to, if you taste lime juice, we tend to like lime juice that's a couple of hours old, because that's how we're used to drinking it on shift. People who come from cultures like some places in Europe where they juice per drink, they prefer fresh lime juice. So it's a lot of things in life aren't better, they're not worse. It's just what you like and what you're used to. Yeah.
All right, is the mic on around to somebody else? Any other more questions? Raise your hand. There's a mic coming around.
Wait, someone's with the mic? All right,
Yep.
we'll get it.
All right, in the center.
Where can I get the book? So are you selling this in Mexico City?
Okay, so the book is Liquid Intelligence. Can you guys order from Amazon.us, or do they shaft you? Yeah, I mean, we only have an English language version now. I know you can get in Canada and the UK, but you know what? I would love to have it be sold here. It was only in English, but do they sell English language books on Amazon in Mexico or no? Yeah? I'll talk to my publisher. I would love to. I mean, like, they would love to. I would love to. And maybe it's an oversight. Maybe they think no one wants to buy it. You know?
Worst case, I'll just smuggle it back next year.
Yeah, okay.
Tales Mexico City, 2016. Another question?
Well,
No one else.
one
Questions?
here.
Yeah? Up front.
Don, can you talk about proper storage for fat washed and milk washed products once we've used alcohol into them?
If you've done a fat wash or a milk wash, you generally want to store them in a walk-in, unless you're going to get rid of it that day. If you are doing a fat wash specifically, it is impossible for you to get all of the fat out unless you're using something like a centrifuge and really working to get all the fat out. Some of that fat will go rancid. Rancid fat can kill you. It's highly unlikely that this will ever happen unless you're storing things that have an active layer of fat in it for a long time. But it is possible. If you find a bottle of something that has been fat washed 2 years ago, take a sip maybe, but don't serve it to your customers. I wouldn't take that risk. Generally, keep things in a refrigerator if you are unsure.
Yeah, also some fats go rancid more than others. One other thing we haven't talked about, when you're using a lot of new techniques at the bar, one problem with using new techniques at the bar, whether it be fat washing or infusion or anything else, or just people who make their own bitters now or anything, is that now you have a lot of prep work that you have to do before your shift, right? Sometimes days before your shift. And so you want your product to last a long time, and you want it to be consistent. And the hardest thing to do with these new techniques is to really lock everything down to make sure that the next person on shift is going to taste the same as when you're doing it now. And so that is actually, it's not learning how to do this. I mean, you can come up with your own techniques or you do this. It's really making sure that it's really bar ready, that it's going to work in the bar, it's going to flow through. So whenever we have a new product, whether it's like a Gustino like I showed you or an infusion, I say to the folks, I'm like, listen, taste it now, it's delicious. Save a little bit of it, and then let's taste it in a week next to a fresh batch. Let me see how stable it is. Let me see whether the specs are going to stay stable over a week. If it's a week, I'll put up with it. You know what I mean? Because if we can't figure out how much we're going to sell in a week's time, we're kind of jokers. You know what I mean? So like, if we can figure that out, like I'm good. But that's really one of the hard parts about using these new techniques is you have new shelf life issues. You have trouble with certain pars, getting your pars right. And so that's where it gets more difficult. It's not the actual workflow while you're shaking. It's the pre-prep and that stuff.
The other thing is you really want to think about your precision. We use the terms accuracy and precision interchangeably in the vernacular, but they actually mean two different things. If you're accurate, it means that you're hitting the right mark. If you're precise, it means you're able to hit the same mark every single time. Even if you're jiggering, if you're off by a little bit, it's fine if you're off by the same amount every single time. If you're going to be using these techniques, you want to be both accurate and precise. You want to hit the same flavor profile every single time, this week, next year. If a customer comes in, has a great drink today, they come back next week and it doesn't taste so good, that's not good business. So when you're locking down how to make good flavors, think about not me doing this today, but who's the bar back that's going to be doing this 2 years from now when I've moved on? And have I idiot-proof this so that we can make it exactly the same every single time?
Yeah, and and the standard stuff applies even more when you're doing this kind of stuff because more can go wrong. So taste all your mise en place before your shift. Don't trust that whoever busted out that ingredient got it right. You know what I mean? It's like, just got to stay on top all the time.
Any more questions? Otherwise, Phil's going to push us off the stage.
Yep. That's it. All the questions are going to be in the lobby after Tony's question here.
Yeah? Oh, all right. Dave, over here. All right. Is there any sort of agent that you can use when you're carbonating to avoid too much foaming?
Okay. The question was, I don't know if the translator could hear it, is there any sort of agent that you can add to a product to prevent foaming when you're carbonating?
Just to say where this comes from, because I've been looking at a couple ready-to-drink teas, and they do have some anti-foaming things.
Right.
They're not carbonated, but just so you shake and the foam will go down.
I have attempted to use anti-foaming agents when I'm carbonating. They have nasty label declarations, like, I forget even what they are, but it's like poly blah blah blah, silic blah 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 blah. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm down with weird stuff, but I wasn't able to get it to work. And so if you're going to add something that is crazy, and it's not really a freaking ingredient. Most of the stuff I use is seaweeds and all this. This is really just kind of a foam killer, and I couldn't get it to work. I think part of the reason is that it does alcohol is more viscous. You have an alcoholic drink, it's more viscous than it is than water, right? But it also has a lower surface tension, so the surface tension is already low. But with that, so the bubbles will eventually go down. But because it's got a low surface tension and high viscosity, it's just woof, and you get this rush. And I'm not able to stop that rush. I've had the foam killers be able to stop a head from staying on something, but I've never had something be able to stop that rush when you're opening it.
Think of it like when you pour soda water versus when you pour a soda that's warm and you get that head. With a soda, you get a much bigger head than you would soda water, and it stays longer. It's from that viscosity. Added to that is the alcohol just wants to let go of those bubbles even more. If you really wanted to just get rid of the bubbles, you could pour oil into it, but then you would lose all the carbonation too. So it's one of those things. It's a trade-off.
Did this make any sense? I hope this is useful. Does this make any damn sense?
All right, well, with that, Tales of the Cocktail Mexico City is a wrap.